The city hummed with a restless energy that Ren had come to know all too well. Working the graveyard shift at a small music studio and juggling part-time gigs at bars, his life was a cycle of frayed guitar strings and lukewarm coffee. He lived for the moments when the world went quiet, yet his heart remained loud, drumming with a passion for music that the industry ignored. His hands were calloused, his eyes tired, but his spirit clung to the melodies he hummed in the dead of night. He was a man out of sync with the urban sprawl, searching for a harmony that remained just out of reach. On the other side of the city was May. Her world was one of precise lines and the unwavering ambition of an architecture student who saw the world as it could be. Her desk was a battlefield of blueprints, illuminated by a lamp that rarely saw the sun. May didn't just want to build houses, she wanted to design monuments to human experience. She was brilliant and driven, possessing a quiet intensity that made people stop and look twice. But beneath her structured exterior was a vulnerability, a fear that her dreams were so large they might eventually leave her standing alone in the silent end. The universe pulled their threads together on a Tuesday evening when the clouds gave way to a torrential downpour. Ren had finished a grueling shift, his instrument case slung over his shoulder like a heavy burden. He ducked into a neon-lit convenience store, hoping to wait out the storm. There, standing by the window, was May. She was staring at the sheet of water cascading from the roof, her portfolio tucked under her arm. Ren stepped forward, offering the small umbrella he'd found in the studio. He didn't say much, just a soft offer to walk her to the station. Under the rhythmic patter of rain, they began to talk. It wasn't the small talk of strangers. It was a soul-stirring exchange of philosophies and hidden fears. The days that followed were a blur of late-night walks through the sleeping city. They became fixtures in each other's lives, finding solace in the quiet hours when the rest of the world slept. Ren would play fragments of unfinished songs, and she would describe the way light should hit the windows of a cathedral. It was an instant connection, a rare alignment of souls. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. As they sat on a park bench one evening, the intensity of their bond became undeniable. They were two people who had spent their lives feeling misunderstood, finally finding a language they both spoke fluently. However, looming over their romance was a shadow. The timing was a cruel joke. May had been awarded a full scholarship to a prestigious university in Paris. The departure date was set. She would be leaving in exactly 1 month. Every laugh and every lingering touch was now measured against a ticking clock. Ren found himself trapped in internal conflict. He was a struggling musician with no steady income, while she was a rising star destined for international success. He wondered if he was merely a temporary distraction in her grand journey. He wanted to tell her to stay, but he knew that would be selfish. He loved her enough to want her to fly, even if he would be left grounded. He began to pull back slightly, trying to protect his heart, yet every time he saw her smile, his resolve crumbled. The fragile peace was shattered in Ren's apartment when he noticed a stray envelope in May's journal. His heart stopped at the official airline seal. May had said she was leaving in 4 weeks, but the ticket said the flight was this weekend. She had been hiding the truth. As the kettle began to whistle, Ren stood frozen, realizing their borrowed time had just been cut short. Ren stared at the ticket, the departure date burning into his vision like cold fire. The silence in the apartment became a living thing, heavy and suffocating. When May walked back into the room, her eyes found the envelope in his hand. There was no defense, only a quiet, broken apology that hung in the air. Their month had been reduced to mere days, and the weight of that loss transformed their world. They decided, through a silent pact, to compress a lifetime of romance into those remaining hours. They walked through the city with the frantic energy of people trying to memorize every detail of a fleeting dream. They revisited the bookstores where they had shared secrets and the park benches where they had watched the stars, attempting to anchor their souls to the physical world they were about to lose. Yet beneath these bittersweet moments, a jagged tension rose. Ren was a man divided. A selfish part of him wanted to scream, to grab her hands and plead for her to stay, to tell her that his music would lose its melody without her. But his love was a protective thing. He knew Paris was her destiny. May, meanwhile, was suffocating under guilt. Every suitcase she packed felt like a brick in a wall. She began to question the ambition that had defined her life, wondering if a career in France was worth the hollow ache already hollowing out her chest. The fracture finally occurred during the city's grand summer festival. The night was alive with the scent of street food and the melody of flutes. Above them, the sky erupted in a violent display of pyrotechnics. Amidst the thunderous fireworks, the pressure of their end date shattered their composure. A small comment about a future project turned into a heated argument. Ren's voice cracked as he accused her of already being halfway across the ocean in her heart. May fired back, her eyes shining with unshed tears, asking him how he could doubt her, when every step toward her dream felt like leaving her soul behind. They stood in the center of the cheering crowd, two islands of misery in a sea of celebration, the distance between them growing wider with every angry word. In the following days, a cruel irony twisted the knife. Ren received a call that should have been the pinnacle of his career. A major label offered him a 3-year contract. It was the stability he had bled for, but it came with a catch. He had to remain in the city. This opportunity now became their final divide. Ren realized he couldn't ask her to stay for his sake, and he couldn't follow her without throwing away his own life's work. To make the separation easier, Ren made a heartbreaking choice. He began to distance himself emotionally, pulling back into a shell of cold indifference. He stopped responding to her messages and stayed late at the studio, avoiding the vulnerability of their final nights. He wanted her to leave with a heart hardened by his perceived coldness, believing anger would be more merciful than longing. He watched her from the shadows, a ghost in his own life, mourning the love he was intentionally killing to set her free. On the night before her flight, the city was shrouded in fog. Ren sat alone in the dark, the silence echoing the void in his chest. He heard a rustling at the doorstep, followed by fading footsteps. When he opened the door, he found a large package. Inside was a hand-drawn blueprint, a design for a house where every window caught the light perfectly, with a room designed for his music. Tucked in the corner was a note. "I designed this for us. I would have stayed, Ren. I would have given it all up if you had only asked." Ren didn't think. He simply ran. The blueprint lay on his floor, a testament to a future that might have been. But his focus was entirely on the fleeting present. He threw himself into his car, the engine roaring as he tore through the fog-slicked streets of the city. Every red light felt like a personal insult from the universe. Every ticking second a heartbeat lost forever. He reached the airport terminal with his lungs burning, pushing through the throngs of travelers who moved like gray ghosts in his peripheral vision. He reached the gate, breathless and disheveled, only to find a wall of reinforced glass separating him from the tarmac. Beyond the pane, the massive aircraft was already taxiing away, a silver bird carrying the architect of his heart toward a horizon he could not reach. He pressed his palm against the cold glass, watching the lights blink until they disappeared into the morning mist. Timing, his oldest and most relentless enemy, had won its final battle. He stood there for a long time, a man grounded while his soul took flight. 5 years passed in a rhythmic cycle of staves and silence. Ren was no longer the struggling boy in the late-shift studio. His name was now etched onto prestigious concert programs and cinematic credits, celebrated for a haunting, melancholic style that seemed to vibrate with a very specific kind of longing. He lived in the success he had once bled for, yet his apartment felt like a hollow shell. Across the ocean, May had become a formidable force in the world of structural design. Her buildings in Paris were celebrated for their ability to capture light in ways that felt like visual poetry. They lived parallel lives, successful and separate, connected only by the ghost of a single month in a rain-drenched city. They were the people they had once dreamed of becoming, yet the cost of that transformation remained a debt unpaid. The reunion happened by accident at an international gallery opening. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low murmur of the cultural elite. Ren stood before a miniature model of a glass pavilion when he felt a familiar shift in the atmosphere, a sudden awareness that pulled at his chest. He turned, and there she was. She looked different. Her style was more refined. Her hair styled with a professional precision that matched her status, but her eyes still held that same soul-stirring depth. They stood in silence for a long moment, the noise of the crowd fading into a dull hum. It was as if the 5 years had been nothing more than a long breath they had both been holding. They found a quiet coffee shop tucked away from the flashbulbs of the gallery. The conversation began with the polite armor of old friends, but the weight of the past soon shattered their composure. As May reached for her cup, the overhead light caught the sharp glint of a diamond on her left hand. The sight of the engagement ring was a silent explosion in the small room. She followed his gaze, her expression softening into a look of quiet regret. She spoke of her fiancé, a kind man who supported her ambitions, but she didn't speak of him with the fire that had once defined their late-night walks. They sat amidst the steam, acknowledging that while their love was the truest thing they had ever known, it was a victim of a world that refused to wait. The confession was a heavy thing. Ren told her about the airport, about the contract he had signed, and about the cowardice of trying to protect her by pushing her away. May leaned forward, her voice a fragile whisper. She told him she had waited at the gate until the final call, hoping he would appear. They realized that if they had been just a little braver, or if the stars had aligned a few weeks differently, their trajectories would have merged. But the timing had permanently altered their paths. They were no longer the same people who had shared an umbrella in the rain. They walked out into the evening air where a light drizzle had begun to fall. They didn't say goodbye, they said thank you. They acknowledged that some loves are meant to be a transformative chapter rather than the whole book. As May walked toward the car where her future waited, Ren stood in the rain, finally letting go. Months later, his latest symphony premiered to a standing ovation. The sheet music on his piano was titled "The Girl from the Rain." The notes were no longer a lament for what was lost, but a celebration of a love that, though mistimed, had changed his music forever.